stabbings, unrest, people running around with machetes, protests in every city across the UK, and increased facial recognition are just a few of the events we've come to see over the last week. It all started on June 18th, when social workers attempted to intervene in a child protection case within the Roma Gypsy community of Hare Hill, Leeds. Because of the high tensions, police were brought in to remove the child from the family. As word spread, a crowd quickly gathered, with the situation rapidly escalating. A bus was set on fire, bricks were thrown at police, cars were utterly demolished and turned over, and the police ran away from the situation. Several weeks later, 3 young girls were stabbed to death, with many others being injured, at a Taylor Swift dance class by a Rwandan second-generation immigrant. For decades, people felt ignored as the Tory party and the Labour Party in Wales flooded the country with migrants who refused to assimilate into our culture. People being evidently and understandably angry at their so-called parliamentary representatives for allowing this to occur in the first place took to the streets to take out their frustration in a scene eerily similar to that of the aftermath of the murder of Emily Jones and Lola Davis. This is an inevitable build-up of the frustration people have of being ignored, silenced with hate crime legislation, and censored on social media platforms. Riots happened in Southport, Hartlepool, and a peaceful protest was organised in London, where 100 people were arrested but never charged. Although it does make a good headline though, doesn't it? Irvert Cooper then condemned the riots in Southport but had a completely different reaction when the riots were ongoing in Hare Hill, Leeds.
Well, I've been talking to West Yorkshire police officers and also local community leaders about the action they're now taking in response to those unacceptable scenes of disorder and criminality that we saw last night. The community is working very closely together in response to what was a local child protection incident, but it's really important that the community can feel safe on the streets and also that the perpetrators feel the full force of the law. So appalling to now see those same police facing violent attacks from thugs on the streets who have no respect for a grieving community. It's a total disgrace. Frankly, this is a time when everyone should be showing respect for a community and for the police.
Keir Starmer then held a press conference to offer up solutions on how the far right should be dealt with, suggesting things like facial recognition and assuring he will do whatever he can to keep the Muslim community safe.
Crime is crime. And so to that end, I can announce today that following this meeting, we will establish a national capability across police forces to tackle violent disorder, shared intelligence, wider deployment of facial recognition technology, and preventative action, criminal behaviour orders to restrict their movements before they can even board a train, in just the same way that we do with football hooligans. And let me also say to large social media companies and those who run them, violent disorder clearly whipped up online, that is also a crime. It's happening on your premises, and the law must be upheld everywhere. In relation to the Muslim community, let me be very clear, I will take every step that's necessary to keep you safe.
Just not the community of Southport. But what is the root cause of this? Yes, of course you can blame Islam, our politicians, the mainstream media, and they all play their part. However, why is our government so reluctant to deal with this problem? Is it because they fear being labelled as racist? Is it because they need terror attacks so they can push mandatory digital IDs? Or new anti-terror legislation to be used against political dissidents and journalists? Is it because the European Court of Human Rights makes it nearly impossible for us to protect our borders? Or is it because Labour wants to change the demographics of Britain so they can win the majority every single time? Until a Sharia party, that is. Now, potentially all 4 reasons are accurate and valid. However, I'm only going to focus on the European Court of Human Rights in this video, because that's something I feel that needs talking about a lot more than it currently does. Despite the referendum in 2016 sparking an overly long process of leaving the European Union, we, for some strange reason, remained part of the European Court of Human Rights. People thought that leaving the EU was enough to sort out our immigration crisis. After all, that's the main reason people voted Brexit. However, none of that can be accomplished. We cannot secure our borders without first leaving the European Court of Human Rights, predominantly because of policies that we have enshrined in law from their Human Rights Convention, like Article 3, Article 6, Article 13, and a few others, which inhibit the UK's ability to tackle immigration. Under the ECHR laws, the UK cannot deport individuals to countries who might be tortured in or face inhumane treatment, separate families if it would negatively affect the right to family life, and detain individuals arbitrarily or without proper legal procedures. Remember the Rwanda asylum plan? Well, there's a bunch of misinterpretations about what it actually was. Yes, in 2022, Boris Johnson did make an announcement that those here illegally and asylum seekers who failed the asylum process would be sent to Rwanda by plane. However, he also hoped it would act as some sort of deterrent, where individuals, rather than waiting around to be deported to Rwanda, would return on a plane back to their home country. The first plane carrying migrants was set to leave the UK in June 2022. However, it was disrupted following intervention by the European Court of Human Rights, citing that the policy violated international law, including the Refugee Convention and human rights laws, mostly that they may face inhumane or degrading treatment upon arriving in Rwanda. In December 2022, the UK High Court ruled that while the plan was legal in principle, individual cases must be addressed separately to ensure compliance with European human rights laws. The plan ended up being scrapped when the Labour Party got in 2024. However, since the plan was forged in 2022, 0 planes have left for Rwanda. The ECHR also has something called Rule 39, which gives them powers to issue urgent orders in exceptional circumstances. These orders are typically requested when the ECHR has reason to believe a person is at imminent risk of irreparable harm to his or her human rights. For example, in the case of MSS v Belgium and Greece in 2011, an Afghan asylum seeker was returned to Greece by Belgium under their domestic regulations. The migrant argued that Greece's asylum system was so inadequate it amounted to inhumane and degrading treatment, violating Article 3 of the European Convention on Human Rights. The ECHR then actioned Rule 39 to issue an interim measure, ordering Belgium to suspend the deportation of the migrant to prevent political harm while the case was being discussed. In 2010, British forces attempted to transfer 2 suspected terrorists, El Sadoun and Mufti, to Iraq. Just for added context, they were both Iraqi officials under Saddam Hussein's regime and were involved in the execution of British Royal Military personnel. The ECHR issued a Rule 39 to stop them from being extradited, as there was a risk of them being executed upon returning to their country. The court ended up ruling that transferring them out of the UK would undermine Article 3 of the European Convention on Human Rights. In 1996, the British Security Services were concerned about an individual called Kulwant Singh Chahal, a Sikh activist from Punjab in India. The UK government sought to deport Chahal, alleging he posed a risk to national security, claiming he was involved in the Sikh separatist movement. Chahal made an appeal to the ECHR, arguing that if he was sent back to India, he would be at real risk of torture or inhumane treatment. And it was well documented at the time how the Indian government treated Sikh activists. The ECHR then intervened, instituting a Rule 39 order, despite the risk he posed to the UK's national security. This set a precedent of absolute protection for migrants, even if they are associated with known terror organisations, if they run the risk of being tortured or facing inhumane treatment upon their return to their home country. But what about the risk these people pose to the British population? Surely that should take precedence? Well, evidently not. Since 2001, the UK government has been attempting to deport Abu Qatada. Abu has been accused by the British establishment of incitement to terrorism. The ECHR ruled that his planned deportation to Jordan would violate Article 3 due to the risk of torture. Abu justified violence against non-Muslims, supported terrorist groups and martyrdom operations, or suicide bombings. He was eventually deported in 2013, thanks to a lengthy legal process. But who knows how many people he successfully radicalised before his deportation in 2013, which could have resulted in numerous deaths from terror attacks, especially considering he supported martyrdom operations. Every year, a few hundred migrants convicted of crimes appeal against their deportation under Article 3 and Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights. In 2013, for instance, 133 foreign criminals were allowed to stay in the UK due to human rights considerations. It is unclear how many of those migrants who were convicted of crimes who avoided deportation go on to reoffend. In that same year, however, in 2013, 26.5% of people went to reoffend, and it's been the roughly same percentage every year. So the probability that some of the foreign criminals have in fact reoffended upon being allowed to stay in the UK is quite high. Now, you may have realised that Hungary and France, who are also members of the European Court of Human Rights, have still been deporting migrants, and you may be asking yourself why that is. Well, when Tony Blair came to power in 1997, he enshrined the European Convention on Human Rights within British law with the 1998 Human Rights Act. Section 1 incorporates the rights set out in the ECHR into British law. Section 2 requires UK courts to take into account the decisions of the ECHR. Section 3 mandates that legislation must be read and given effect in a way that is compatible with the European Convention on Human Rights. Section 4 allows higher courts to issue a declaration of incompatibility if they find that a UK law is incompatible with the ECHR. Section 6 makes it unlawful for public bodies to act in a way that is incompatible with the ECHR. And Section 7 allows individuals to bring proceedings in domestic courts if they believe that ECHR rights have been violated. If it weren't for the 1998 Human Rights Act, none of these policies or rulings from the European Court of Human Rights would be enforceable by law. This is how Hungary and France, despite being members of the ECHR, are able to deport migrants. I also just wanted to say that whilst Starmer is increasing his facial recognition powers, that violates of Articles 6, 8, 10 and 11 of the European Convention on Human Rights. So on the one side, they're more than happy to listen to the ECHR when they're not allowed to deport terrorists or rapists. However, on the other side, they completely ignore the ECHR when increasing draconian measures. Weird. Now you may be asking yourself, well, how do we leave? At an international level, it's quite simple. All we would need to do is notify the Council of Europe of our intention to leave the ECHR with 6 months' notice. At a domestic level, we would need to seek the approval of Parliament before notifying the Council of Europe and letting them know that we will be leaving through an act of Parliament. Now, I'm sure you can see there's a trend of the ECHR protecting terrorists and stopping them from being deported from the UK, which there's then a high risk of them actually committing a terror attack in the UK, which affects the British population. But we can't deport them, we can't do anything about it. I hope you enjoyed the video. This is James Harvey from Vox Populi. I'll speak to you all soon. Cheers.